Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming. It's just been over 1 year since Resolution 2436 was unanimously adopted. This landmark resolution focused on enhancing peacekeeping performance. We have identified this event as an opportunity to reflect on the progress of, and more importantly, gaps in its implementation. We are delighted to have the Secretary General today with us, providing opening remarks before we turn to 4 thematic sessions focused on best practices in peacekeeping. We are equally happy to have India, Portugal, Senegal, Uruguay, and Vietnam as co-hosts for this event. Today, we will also hear from Lieutenant General Gillespie, the Force Commander of MINUSMA, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State, and my friend, Clark Cooper, and Undersecretary General Lucroix. I will now deliver remarks as the United States representative to the United Nations. The images of blue UN helmets and white UN planes are associated by people around the world with men and women saving lives, delivering humanitarian assistance, and supporting peace processes. There's a reason for this. Peacekeeping is among the most impactful undertakings of the United Nations. Peacekeepers operate in some of the world's most challenging environments, in many cases rising above the challenges they face. In the Central African Republic, a Zimbabwean battalion is protecting civilians during fighting between armed groups. In Kosovo, a gender advisor is incorporating women and girls' perspectives into community building exercises. And in South Sudan, peacekeepers from more than 60 nations, including today's co-sponsors, India and Vietnam, are working together to bring stability to the country. The United States strongly supports UN peacekeeping as well as the military, police, and civilian workers to maintain peace in some of the world's most perilous places. That's why we contribute $1.7 billion to the UN peacekeeping budget. It's why we're the largest bilateral supporter of troop and police contributing countries in the world each year. But while we strongly support effective peacekeeping, we must also be forthright in acknowledging that peacekeepers too often fail to meet the standards of their mandates. We have seen the direct consequences of poor performance. Troops left vulnerable to attacks from armed groups in the DRC. Children, hear me out, children abused by the blue helmets charged with protecting them in the CAR. Civilians abandoned by peacekeepers during active conflict in South Sudan. Poor performance harms the reputation of the UN, the SRSG, and troop and police contributing countries. But of far greater concern is that it puts human lives at risk. Those of the people the UN is mandated to protect and the peacekeepers sent to protect them. For all their sakes, we must hold peacekeeping missions, leadership, and uniformed and civilian staff accountable. That's what today is all about, accountability. And Resolution 2436 calls for the accountability we need: clear, objective performance standards for all UN peacekeeping personnel, measures to address underperformance, incentives and recognition for outstanding performance, improved reporting on performance, and deployment decision based on performance data. Today, we must assess our progress on implementing United Nations Security Council Resolution 2436, and we must also look forward, asking what each UN and the member states should do, what gaps remain, and what concrete, time-bound commitments we must make to fill them. We support the Secretariat's recent initiatives to improve reporting and transparency on peacekeeping performance, including greater detail on performance in the Secretary General's report to the Security Council on individual missions. As the rollout of the UN's Comprehensive Performance Assessment System continues, we expect that these reports will include an impact-based analysis of peacekeeping successes and peacekeeping shortfalls. This will ensure that council members have the information they need to tailor mandates to country or region-specific needs, and that all stakeholders can participate in candid discussions about various missions' futures. We are pleased by the Secretariat's initiatives to keep Security Council members apprised on performance, a responsibility mandated by UN SCR 2436. We look forward to discussions on performance trends, including accountability measures and examples of outstanding performance. Further, the Secretariat has made commendable progress evaluating uniformed personnel performance. However, we must evaluate the performance of civilian staff, including those based in New York, and field mission leadership. Accountability is for all personnel, not just troops and police. Finally, we see a serious lack of progress in accountability for poor performance, which begins with setting expectations. Civilian and uniformed personnel need to know the standards they will be held to and the consequences for not meeting those standards. Accountability measured should be administered ad hoc, not be administered ad hoc, but rather based on clearly defined policies visible to everyone. UNSCR 2436 is explicit that these measures must include remediation, withholding reimbursement, dismissal of civilian personnel, and repatriation of uniformed personnel. We urgently call on the Secretariat to develop an accountability mechanism identifying which such measures should be triggered. This mechanism, which should include troop, police, and civilian components, is necessary for both setting and enforcement of clear standards for UN personnel. This is just one of the tools available to us to improve missions, several of which we will discuss today. As General Dos Santos Cruz noted in his report, accountability also contributes to the safety and the security of peacekeepers. We cannot overlook this fact, as today's peacekeeping missions operate in increasingly hostile environments. The U.S. is ready to support accountability efforts, especially through capacity-building assistance in troop and police contributing countries. Our existing partnerships with these countries allow for better peacekeeping preparation, deployment, and support. During the third session today, our Assistant Secretary for Political Military Affairs will share how we are investing in more effective and accountable peacekeeping around the world through our partnerships. There are many examples of outstanding performance, and you will hear some today. However, we rarely hear these peacekeeping success stories from the UN, so we urge the Secretariat to highlight such examples in regular public reporting. After all, member states and taxpayers should know when peacekeepers go above and beyond to fulfill their mandated task. Last year, the Secretary General challenged us all to come together to reform peacekeeping. The Action for Peacekeeping initiative rallied member states and the Secretariat to address the persistent challenges facing modern-day peacekeeping. We now have the chance to build on this momentum. UNSCR 2436 represents a clear mandate from the Security Council, and it fully supports the performance and accountability pillar of A4P. It calls on us to ensure UN standards and requirements are met, hold all civilian and uniformed peacekeepers accountable, and address performance shortfalls. I have already said that today is about accountability. But we are not concerned with accountability merely for its own sake. We care about it because accountability, accountable peacekeeping, means greater safety and security for vulnerable people around the world and for the peacekeepers themselves. Fully implementing Resolution 2436 will show that the blue helmet is the gold standard for peacekeeping around the world. The United States, along with our co-hosts and partners, are committed to striving for and meeting this standard. Thank you. Allow me now to turn this event over to Secretary General Guterres.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank the United States and our co-hosts, India, Portugal, Senegal, Uruguay, and Vietnam, for convening this event and for their support to United Nations peacekeeping operations. Our peacekeepers represent the last best hope for millions of people around the world. Some of them operate in highly dangerous environments just short of full-blown conflict. We can never forget their service and sacrifice. And as the nature of conflict evolves, peace operations face more dangerous environments, adversaries, and weapons. And the Action for Peacekeeping initiative, launched in March last year, was conceived to respond to these challenges. Action for Peacekeeping stresses our shared commitment to improve the performance of United Nations peacekeeping missions. We welcome every opportunity to consider our effectiveness, including those provided by Security Council Resolution 2436, as our chair has mentioned, on enhancing peacekeeping performance at all levels. Performance is a collective responsibility of all those involved in peacekeeping. These responsibilities start with the Security Council and the adequate defining of mandates. It proceeds through the Secretariat and through me personally as Secretary General. And in the field, United Nations military, police, and civilian staff all have a role. Performance is also a responsibility of member states, as troop and police contributors, host governments, members of the General Assembly, as financial contributors and providers of capacity-building support. Since the launch of Action for Peacekeeping, we have seen some clear improvements. Our first mission is to support peace processes and political solutions. And, for example, in the Central African Republic, thanks to our enhanced partnership with the African Union, MINUSCA has contributed to the peace agreement with multiple armed groups, a tangible political and security gain that is now being implemented. Across all missions, we have introduced new systems and tools to evaluate performance. These include regular military and police unit evaluations, hospital evaluation systems, and other mechanisms to address the work of civilian personnel. As a result, we are engaging with member states in a more focused way, and in some cases we have repatriated underperforming troops. In others, we have deployed mentors or training teams. At the same time, we are doing everything possible to improve accountability and end sexual exploitation and abuse by UN peacekeepers through strong prevention and response measures centered on victims and survivors. We have improved our outreach, and the victims' rights advocate and I have made a priority to meet survivors personally. The 87 members of the Circle of Leadership have committed to ending impunity and to supporting efforts to combat sexual exploitation and abuse across the United Nations system. And I'd also like to thank 103 member states that have signed the voluntary compact to eliminate sexual exploitation and abuse. We need your continued support so that these commitments become a reality on the ground every day. And to those who have not yet joined, I invite you to do so. We have improved the analysis that informs key decisions about our peace operations. As a result, UNMISS, for example, has shifted towards a more mobile posture, enhanced the sharing of peacekeeping intelligence, and improved its casualty evacuation procedures. And we have also reduced the number of units experiencing gaps in vital equipment from 23 units in 2018 to 12 today. But even those 12 need to be addressed and solved. There has been progress on increasing the numbers of women in peacekeeping at all levels, but still a slow progress. And this is a key way of improving performance, as noted in Resolution 2436. The biggest success was in the number of female military staff officers and observers that has doubled since 2017 to 14.5%. Women peacekeepers on patrol improve the effectiveness of our protection for all civilians, and in particular for women. In South Sudan, women police working with UNMISS have improved community outreach, while women troops in MINUSCA have supported efforts to address conflict-related sexual violence. Strengthening peacekeeping performance includes improving the safety and security of peacekeepers. And here too, we have seen progress. Fatalities due to hostile acts among uniformed personnel went down from 58 in 2017 to 27 in 2018 and 23 so far in 2019. And this was not because forces became less proactive. It is exactly because forces became more proactive that it was also possible not only to protect better civilians, but to reduce the number of casualties. 22 of the 23 fatalities we suffered this year were peacekeepers in MINUSMA, our most dangerous mission. And there was just one fatality in our 12 other missions combined. And in MINUSMA, we are facing an environment where all kinds of terrorist organizations are operating and where peacekeeping, indeed, is, I would say, a strange concept in an area where there is at all no peace to keep. But even in Mali, we have reduced peacekeeper fatalities from improvised explosive devices from 24 in 2016 to 5 so far in 2019. And we are also making peacekeeping operations more flexible and more responsive, working across civilian and uniformed personnel to fulfill our mandates, including the facilitation of political processes and the protection of civilians. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, for example, MONUSCO is using a combination of military bases, 6 rapid deployable battalions, and civilian personnel to prevent and respond to threats to civilians. But even with these efforts, in recent developments in the Beni area of northern DRC, we have a cause for serious concern. The killing of more than 100 civilians by the Allied Democratic Forces, coming after years of armed violence, has sparked understandable frustration with the authorities and with MONUSCO. Our hearts go out to all those who have lost their loved ones. And this frustration has split over into armed attacks on our peacekeepers and humanitarian workers. These are doubly worrying because they all play an important part in supporting the response to the Ebola outbreak and in meeting the humanitarian needs of the people living in the areas. MONUSCO is now reinforcing its presence and increasing its outreach activities. It is absolutely essential to have a close contact with populations, to understand their needs, their fears, their aspirations, and to be able to respond to their anxieties in a much more proactive way. This is a gap in which we still need to substantially improve in several of our operations. And we are working closely with the government and all Congolese partners to strengthen the protection of civilians in this difficult context. We are assessing our response to these incidents. The Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations has just returned from the Beni area, and General Alberto dos Santos Cruz will conduct a more comprehensive assessment in the coming weeks. Also, in relation to this, accountability needs to be based on solid and objective analysis. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, looking ahead, we must keep up this momentum and strengthen our partnership for collective action to improve peacekeeping performance. First, we need to do more to support missions in these most challenging environments. In Mali, we are considering reconfiguring the force, and we are improving coordination with the Malian, G5 Sahel, and Barkhane forces on the ground. Recent events have proven how difficult this is in that extremely dangerous context. Second, we must build greater capacity in our peacekeeping forces so that they can fully implement their mandate, particularly protection of civilians. The Light Coordination Mechanism is supporting partnerships to increase capacity, while the Triangular Partnership Project is helping to equip and train specialist troops. We must build on this while improving leadership training. We are making progress, but we still have a long way to go. Third, we must enhance our intelligence, situation analysis, and understanding of the needs and aspirations of host governments and local populations. We need to strengthen our direct engagement and communications with the people around us, and also to use the most sophisticated and modern techniques to counter false narratives and connect with the people we serve. Fourth, we need to build on progress made by several missions over the past year to establish and strengthen implementation of the human rights due diligence policy. This includes human rights risk assessment, review mechanisms, and training. Fifth, women peacekeepers are a force multiplier. We need more. We must remove barriers that prevent women from being deployed, including a lack of basics like personal protection equipment. Six, we can do more to reduce peacekeeping fatalities by enhancing force protection and improving trauma care. Our commitment to you is that we will never allow a peacekeeper to die for want of adequate and timely medical care. In the last 9 months, none of the injured peacekeepers have died, and this was only possible by a substantial improvement of our care capacity. Seventh, we must fill critical equipment gaps, including with helicopters, quick reaction forces, and enabling units like engineers, transport, and medical units. There are still many meaningful gaps, especially as we move from a traditional peacekeeping concept where peace is what is to be maintained to situations where peace is quite elusive, as we are facing in so many scenarios. Eighth, those who commit unlawful acts and engage in misconduct, including sexual exploitation and abuse, must be prosecuted and punished. And our cooperation with member states is absolutely essential to make it happen in all the situations detected. Ninth, we plan to build a framework in cooperation with troop and police contributing countries to better systematize performance evaluation and accountability. 10th and finally, United Nations peacekeeping missions must set standards for sustainability and environment management. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, political solutions must remain front and center in all efforts to achieve sustainable peace. The conflict in the Central African Republic is just one example in which the signing of a peace agreement through close coordination with the African Union and the Economic Community of Central African States led to a significant reduction in violence and civilian death. Elsewhere, political solutions often remain elusive. In South Sudan, we have not yet made the progress we hoped for. In Mali, the implementation of the Algiers Agreement has been too slow, and I welcome the recent announcement of the start of the National Dialogue on 14th of December and urge all parties to contribute. In the absence of political solutions, armed groups may try to exploit a power vacuum and create even greater insecurity. And unfortunately, there are limits to what peace operations can achieve. Counterterrorism is beyond our mandate, and in Mali, for example, our collective success is reliant on our partnership with national forces, the G5 Sahel and Barkhane, as I mentioned. I therefore call again on members of the Security Council to provide sustainable and predictable funding as well as robust frameworks for African peace operations that have a clear comparative advantage in peace enforcing and counterterrorism. And I also urge you to address the serious cash crisis that is affecting the United Nations, including in peacekeeping. Thanks to increased flexibility in the management of resources between missions, we have reduced outstanding payments to troop and police contributing countries for active operations to an all-time low. But this is just a temporary solution. The underlying liquidity and structural problems with the budget remain, so we can expect the debt crisis to recur. United Nations peace operations are more cost-effective than ever, But we cannot implement mandates without consistent, predictable, and adequate financing. We need budgets to follow mandates, not mandates to follow budgets. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our peace operations around the world depend on successful partnerships, particularly with member states. And I hope you work closely with us to build a culture of continual improvement and accountability so that we can meet the expectations of the people we serve. And I thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General, for all your efforts to support peacekeeping. We believe Security Council Resolution 2436 fits squarely under the Action for Peacekeeping theme of performance and accountability, and we look forward to continuing to working with you to implement the resolution of this regard. One quick housekeeping note. We have a lot of interest in today's event, but unfortunately not able to accommodate all of those who signed up after the deadline. But we appreciate your interest and support, as this is very important. Given the long speaking list, we would ask everyone to please keep their remarks to 3 minutes. Thanks so much. Now we turn to our first session on the protection of civilians and combating sexual exploitation and abuse. I invite the permanent representative of Uruguay to speak about the very important work they're putting into practice, a policy to combat sexual exploitation and abuse.
Señora Presidenta,
Madam President, Secretary General, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin this statement by thanking the permanent representative of the United States, Ambassador Kelly Craft, for having organized this high-level event, and similar thanks go to the other co-hosts. I would also like to acknowledge the participation of the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, and thank him for his very helpful and thought-provoking opening remarks.
to be co-hosting in this event, and we look forward to having a productive session on how to advance peacekeeping performance and address the remaining gaps in implementing Security Council Resolution 2436. I will focus my statement on combating sexual exploitation and abuse, SEA, when these crimes are committed by personnel serving under the United Nations flag, whether in peacekeeping or special political missions, other United Nations entities or not United Nations international forces by the Security Council, is our collective and shared responsibility to protect and assist victims and complainants and to take appropriate action against perpetrators. Today, with the UN zero tolerance policy, we are seeing a positive transformation in facing this scourge. The victim-centered approach is increasingly being mainstreamed, in part through new tools to mitigate risk and prevent the recruitment of those with history of sexual exploitation or abuse. There is also an increase and strengthening partnership between member states and the United Nations Secretariat through the Voluntary Compact on Preventing and Addressing Sexual Exploitation and Abuse, and the Secretary General's Circle of Leadership on the prevention and response to these crimes in peacekeeping operations. In addition, the Action for Peacekeeping, A4P, initiative reflects the commitment of member states, organizations, and the United Nations to holding personnel and leadership accountable for that improper conduct. Nevertheless, more still needs to be done, bearing in mind that sexual exploitation and abuse harms those we serve, undermines the United Nations values and principles, and tarnishes the reputation of women and men who work with integrity and dedication to realize the objectives of the organization. Before concluding, I would like to highlight some recent recent initiatives and action that Uruguay has been undertaking to prevent and respond to sexual exploitation and abuse. In the UN framework, we take part in every effort related to the matter. In this regard, we endorse the A4 Peace Declaration, signing the voluntary compact, and our President is an active supporter of this circle of leadership. On this last point, in 2018, we respond to the Secretary General's request for updates on national initiative to eradicate sexual exploitation and abuse. All members of our national contingents must approve a pre-deployment course designed by professional external to the armed force and with the participation of the United Nations Country Office. This course is focused on human rights, international humanitarian law, sexual exploitation and abuse policy, and gender and child protection policies. Furthermore, our peacekeeping must sign a pre-deployment affidavit in which they accept responsibilities arising from the breach of this contract. Uruguay has recently established a focal point in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs where alleged victims of sexual exploitation and abuse can seek advice concerning procedures available to them for exercising their rights under Uruguayan law. For its part, the Ministry of National Defense has put in place a protocol to provide the broadest guarantees in the procedures of alleged cases of sexual exploitation and abuse, with the objective of conducting the necessary investigation promptly and transparently. Notwithstanding the effort I mentioned, Uruguay is still facing some challenge with regard to the effective access of alleged victims to justice and also to resolve some paternity claims originated in the past. We are committed to overcome those challenges. To that end, we work in close collaboration with the UN Secretariat Conduct and Discipline Service to develop new cooperation modalities. To conclude, I encourage member state intervention in this session so all the participants can benefit from hearing about best practice and ongoing challenges in effective addressing sexual exploitation and abuse in UN peace operations. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Ambassador. I also invite the permanent representative of Portugal to speak. Our Portuguese friends have done a remarkable job ensuring the protection of civilians in MINUSCA, and we look forward to hearing from them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kraft, also for organizing this event. The Secretary General's presence here today, the Action for Peacekeeping initiative, and the joint declaration of shared commitments are further evidence of the SG and the Secretariat's attachment to enhancing the impact of peacekeeping. Portugal has maintained a consistent participation in UN peacekeeping operations, and we are currently engaged in 6 missions. Today, I would like to share the Portuguese experience in Central African Republic, where we have deployed a contingent of 180 military as the MINUSCA's Quick Reaction Force, as well as 13 police personnel. Allow me to refer to the following phases of our engagement: pre-deployment, deployment, and post-deployment. First, pre-deployment. Training of our peacekeepers is a top priority. Prior to the deployment, they undergo a 6-month mission-oriented training program on international humanitarian law, human rights, peacekeeping operations, rules of engagement, protection of civilians, namely children, prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse, and cooperation between international organizations. In this case, mainly the cooperation between the United Nations and the African Union. Knowing that recent evidence shows that peacekeepers are operating in ever more challenging security situations, this program is instrumental to ensure that they are fully aware of the environment, of the UN procedures, and the UN Code of Conduct, and also of the mission's mandate. Only a thorough and updated training ensures high standards, proper posture, and effective performance. Second, deployment. We also invest in mission training. It gives our contingents the tools to operate in their specific areas of deployment and to work together with the other military and police contingents. The Portuguese Quick Reaction Force is operating without restrictions or reservations. Such a mandate requires a high level of mobility and rapid response, especially when faced with situations of unprotected civilians. From an operational point of view, the conditions in Central African Republic have required the Portuguese forces to develop and test strong capabilities against ambushes in urban environments. Furthermore, joint military and police operations are needed for the protection of civilians, and this, of course, in close cooperation with the local authorities, in order to restore, as much as possible, normal conditions of life for the population. I would like to draw special attention to the role of female troops in our contingents in MINUSCA. They are performing in a very volatile and demanding security environment. Their presence has been crucial in establishing a basic tenet for effective protection of civilians, a relation of trust, respect, and proximity with the local population. Our police forces play also an important role in all the 3 tiers of protection of civilians and have been especially praised for their role in criminal investigation and analysis. Third, post-deployment. Considering the challenges on the ground and the demanding operations that the Quick Reaction Force has been performing in the Central African Republic since 2017, we have decided to rotate its contingent every 6 months. Moreover, when our peacekeepers return home, they go through a 6-month regeneration program. This program focuses on recuperation of the physical and psychological conditions of the soldiers and the police personnel, but also on the analysis of the accumulated experience from the field, producing reliable lessons learned. An example of those lessons learned. 1 year after we started at the Central African Republic, we proposed to reinforce the Quick Reaction Force with a team of information gathering personnel, with a model of armored protected vehicles, and also with more unmanned aerial vehicles in order to increase the levels of mobility, rapid response, and overall safety and security. It is essential, in our view, to have this short-term feedback. Evaluating the concrete experience on the ground allows us to better identify in real time the existing needs in relation to the fulfillment of the mandate and to fine-tune continuously our pre-deployment training. I would also like to highlight the very useful United Nations European Union Partnership on Crisis Management and Peace Operations. The fact that the Portuguese peacekeepers also benefit from the experience in European operations, mainly the deployment of police personnel, clearly enriches their performance levels. I conclude by thanking the permanent cooperation of the Department for Peace Operations in identifying best practices. In this vein, we stand ready to share our experience and our lessons learned, namely by assisting in the training of contingents from other troop or police contributing countries who may so wish. And I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. We are pleased that both Uruguay and Portugal were willing to co-host this event with us. We are now shifting to our member state interventions. Please limit your interventions to no more than 3 minutes so we can ensure that interested member states are able to speak. I now give the floor to the Minister of Poland.
Secretary General, Excellencies, let me start by my remarks by noting that Poland's term as an elected member of the United Nations Security Council is coming to an end. We look at these past 2 years with satisfaction as we have managed to accomplish a lot. Under the leadership of the President Andrzej Duda and the strong involvement of the government partners, During our term, Poland has put emphasis on the role of international law, including the humanitarian law, the protection of the most vulnerable, including the protection of civilians, and the prevention of conflicts. In the context of today's debate, let me also stress that following the decision of the President Andrzej Duda, the Commander-in-Chief of Polish Armed Forces, Poland has decided to return to peacekeeping operations under UN auspices. In November, our troops joined the UNIFIL operations in Lebanon. Madam Chair, Poland understands very well that peacekeeping is an instrument which, if utilized effectively, can truly make the world a safer and better place. It is one of the greatest tools in the UN has at its disposal in order to fulfill its mandate. Considering the fact that constantly evolving world creates new threats and challenges, maintaining peace and security remains at the core of the stable international order and is crucial for the existence of the entire humanity. Focusing on the first of the topics proposed for our discussion, let me stress that the role of the peacekeeping in the protection of the civilians is essential. The high-level independent panel on peace operations report rightly pointed out that the principles of peacekeeping should never be used as an excuse for failure to protect civilians. Ever since the first UN peacekeeping mission in 1948, this organization has on a daily basis answered to the question, what should be done to improve protection of civilians in the context of peacekeeping operations? 4 paramount elements can be distinguished. First, solid legal instruments that set, without a hint of doubt, binding rules on what the protection of civilians means. Second, fluent knowledge of these rules among both peacekeepers and local populations. Third, practice, by showing how rules apply in the real-life situations on the ground. And fourth, accountability, identifying and punishing every single violation of international humanitarian law or other rules protecting civilians. We cannot allow for impunity. Ensuring all these 4 elements is a collective responsibility of the UN as an organization, its member states, and in particular of troop-contributing countries. Only when all these 4 elements are taken as a whole, civilians can be effectively protected. Let me also strongly emphasize our full support for the strict implementation of the zero-tolerance policy towards acts of sexual exploitation and abuse. Poland attaches great importance to these issues and severely condemns any such act committed by the peacekeeping personnel. Such violations are not justifiable, and the only way to prevent them is through discipline, professionalism, and transparency. As members of the United Nations, we have an obligation to show that there is no acceptance whatsoever for such an acts in the UN peacekeeping. Protection and support of victims of conflict-related sexual violence is one of the declared outcomes of our National Action Plan for Women, Peace and Security, which was adopted by the Council of Ministers of Poland in 2018. Madam Chair, as the international community, we have heard too many excuses for inaction, and they were, in fact, often inexcusable. Poland also, for the historical reasons, will always stand on the side of those who are the victims of aggression, those who are the vulnerable, never on the side of invaders. Therefore, protection of the civilians remains the highest priority issue for Poland. It has been so during decades of our active participation in the US peacekeeping missions. That is why we have acceded to the Kigali principles. And for the same reason, we have emphasized solid both theoretical and practical training in international humanitarian law of our troops. Most recently, as I said, the ones we have resumed their service in UNIFIL. I am convinced that the collective efforts of all parties involved in the peacekeeping will amount to a better and more effective protection of civilians on the one hand and the resolution of conflicts on the other. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I now give the floor to the Ambassador of Belgium.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you,
Madam President, I would like to thank you and your co-sponsors for having convened this high-level meeting. I would also like to very warmly thank the Secretary-General for his frank and detailed briefing. Belgium supports the initiative Action for Peacekeeping, the implementation of the Declaration of Shared Commitments, and tries to be a champion, in particular regarding performance. Highly performing peacekeeping operations, first and foremost, enable mandates to be fulfilled, and civilian protection is often the main one. The credibility of the UN missions in Mali, the DRC, the CAR, and South Sudan really depend on their ability to effectively protect civilians. The worst incidents in terms of performance relate to this protection. In this context, we are delighted with the new policy on the protection of civilians. The protection of civilians is primarily the responsibility of the host country. We cannot stress enough the importance of good cooperation between the host country and the mission to effectively protect civilians. Effectiveness is a key element of missions being accepted by civilian populations, but also it's key to ensuring the ongoing commitment of TCCs and financial backers. The performance of missions doesn't just depend on appropriate capabilities and trained troops. It also depends on the way in which the missions function and use their capabilities. Having the military, police and civilian components in peacekeeping operations is a comparative advantage. This enables a multidimensional approach to violence and to its root causes. It's also a challenge because these different components sometimes find it difficult to work together. Robust planning and coordination must serve to link the work of each component in the mission to political strategy, strategies and protection of civilians. How can we integrate the different components? There's a need to develop a mission planning process and a decision-making process, integrating the different contributions of the different components to achieve these objectives. As requested in 2436, we are convinced that the CPAS, Comprehensive Performance Assessment System, has the potential to identify weaknesses and to contribute to better integrated action. Finally, one performance factor involves striking a better balance between the tasks in the mandates and necessary resources. Indeed, financial resources, but also human resources and appropriate equipment. A more flexible approach to the protection of civilians seems to be the best path to follow, but it requires capacities that are adapted to this agile approach. Thank you very much indeed, Madam President.
Thank you, Ambassador. I give the floor to the Ambassador of Rwanda.
Thank you. I thank you very much, Ambassador Kraft, for organizing today's event, and I thank very much the Secretary General for his straightforward and very clear opening remarks. Let me just start by saying that Rwanda, as a top troop and police contributing country, I would like to share very simple elements and of our approach towards the protection of civilians and combating sexual exploitation and abuse. At the core of our approach is one really simple fact, knowing that we protect more effectively when we are trusted by communities where peacekeepers intervene. We work on that. So it is important to invest in pre- and post-deployment training. These trainings are vital to instill in our troops and police the discipline, the readiness to take appropriate actions for the protection of civilians, and to prepare them for the realities they will be confronted with on the ground. They also inform our training cycle for future deployment, because upon coming back, they share what has been encountered on the field. Our peacekeepers also regularly interact with local communities, including local leaders, by engaging in community services. Those community services may be providing medical services to community, building schools, all sorts of services, interacting with communities, and by doing so, they gain their trust, and they are able to receive vital information that will enable them to protect more effectively civilians, or at least to alert before some really criminal activities are undertaking targeting civilians. Rwanda has also deployed national investigation officers in each Rwanda unit, and that has been done since 2011, 5 years before they be made mandatory at the UN. This demonstrates our commitment to ensuring strict accountability, including for sexual abuse and exploitation. Let me say finally that in the opening remarks, you insisted on really accountability, and we believe accountability is core. We cannot expect to be considered as credible or to be trusted by populations where we fail to protect civilians. Protection of civilians is absolutely at the heart of peacekeeping. Where we fail to protect civilians, we cannot expect it to be trusted by communities. And we cannot report that our peacekeepers have been performing. No, we need absolutely to look, to really have a hard look at what happened exactly and on all the continuum of peacekeeping. We are informed by our own experience clearly, and we have compiled that experience in what we call the Kigali Principles on Protection of Civilians, which were alluded to by the Minister of Poland. These principles are informed by what we have learned over the years. So again, trust. Let's build the trust, the capabilities, and accountability for what happened. But protection of civilians is at the heart of peacekeeping. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. I now give the floor to Nepal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to begin by thanking the United States and all co-host countries for organizing this high-level event. I also thank Secretary General for his comprehensive remarks this morning. My intervention is on the first theme of this morning, that is protection of civilians and sexual abuse, sexual exploitation and abuse. The POC and SEA have become major issues to grapple with in UN peace operations. Over the periods, the Security Council has adopted a number of resolutions in developing and consolidating the normative framework in these areas. There's no doubt that the state has the primary responsibility to protect its civilians and prevent violence against them. When the government is unable or unwilling to protect its civilians, the UN should step in to support the national governments in enhancing its efforts on POC and SEA. Madam Chair, let me put following points. First, the local community should be engaged in the promotion of social harmony, tolerance, and understanding among themselves. The ownership and primacy of local actors should be strengthened. Similarly, the local community leaders, youth, women, and civil society organizations have a crucial role to play for strengthening and social fabric for the peace and harmony. Second, the investment in education, awareness program, and employment generation are the most decent investment for the protection of civilians in the long run. Similarly, an inclusion policy must be adopted and promoted in all issues of social life, including in public governance. Third, the mandates of POC and combating SEA should be supported by matching resources for their proper implementation, and zero tolerance policy on all forms of sexual exploitation and abuse must be implemented. Fourth, the monitoring and evaluation of the implementation of POC mandates must be strengthened, and deploying full-time personnel with the right technical expertise, such as women protection advisors, child protection advisors, and civilian protection advisors. Fifth, the pre-deployment training and regular in-mission training for peacekeepers should be conducted to protect civilians in ever-evolving complex environment. And Madam Chair, lastly, those who commit an indiscriminate and disproportionate attack on the civilian population, civilian objects, should be held accountable as per human rights law and international humanitarian law. I conclude, Madam Chair, by expressing Nepal's support to the international normative framework on POC and SEA, as well as by underscoring the need for reinforcing the existing standards and their effective implementation. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I give the floor to the permanent representative of Zambia, who will conclude this session.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Zambia has been fortunate in its peacekeeping missions, and the level of success has depended on a number of things. First is the recruitment policy. We have a recruitment policy that ensures that at least 30% of people recruited into the police and military services are women. We also, as a matter of policy, ensure that 15% of peacekeepers are female. We have had a contingent in Central African Republic, in Birao, on which I have been asked to say a few words. But it is also important that, as my colleagues have said, that we invest in pre-deployment training. In Zambia, we have adopted a concept called FET, which is a Female Engagement Team, as a capability of our peacekeeping forces. To highlight a few of the positive aspects that can be shared as best practices in the field, one is the building of trust, which my colleagues have referred to. And we have come to realize that where we have female peacekeepers, these are a force multiplier in building trust. Two, information gathering. Again, we have come to realize that our female peacekeepers have proved to be a formidable source of intelligence gathering. And in situations where male peacekeepers face challenges to gather much needed intelligence, female peacekeepers, through interaction with women in the communities, have the ability to read the situation and provide a more valuable source of information and enhanced situational awareness. We also believe that we have succeeded because of our efforts to respect, to understand the cultures in which we are operating. And this has helped break cultural boundaries where our female peacekeepers especially have been able to interact with the communities and sharing their cultures with the communities, learning those cultures and interacting with them at a level where there's mutual respect. There is, of course, as part of our policy, zero tolerance to sexual exploitation and abuse. We have over 200 female military and police officers deployed in peacekeeping missions, and we remain committed to continue with that. Finally, other than the women's active participation in peace and security matters in the Central African Republic, the Zambian contingent has been working tirelessly to ensure that the 2019 peace accord process between the government and the 14 armed rebel groups results into stability by putting that country on the trajectory of sustainable peace and security. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And on a personal note, I really appreciate Ambassador from Zambia and the Minister of Poland mentioning the importance of females in peacekeeping troops. Thank you very much. And I think we all can echo that thank you to the two of you. This concludes session one, and the Secretary General and I will both have to depart at this time. So I want to thank each of you for your contributions to today's event. Your efforts to strengthen the performance of peacekeeping missions, and your work to implement Resolution 2436 have been indispensable to improving peacekeeping.
I'd now like to invite Undersecretary General Lacroix to the dais, who's already here. Hello. Before we begin our second session on evaluating and supporting troop and police performance. Welcome. We were delighted that Senegal agreed to co-host this event with us, as they have done an excellent job evaluating and training their formed police units. Similarly, we were pleased to see Force Commander Lieutenant General Gillenspoor was able to attend from Mali to speak on the Force Commander's assessments and how those assessments tie into the new comprehensive performance evaluation system. As we look forward to further implementation of UNSCR 2436, we understand that CPAS will evaluate how the mission performs as a whole, including the performance of civilian components and all uniformed personnel. I now turn it over to Force Commander Lieutenant General Gillenspoor.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to address this distinguished audience concerning the important task to improve peacekeeping performance and to fully implement the UN Security Council Resolution 2436. The adoption of the resolution coincided with my in-processing here in New York, and it became a cornerstone in my preparations as a force commander. Indeed, when leaving New York for Bamako, I felt mounting expectations to enhance performance, and this was further perpetuated by the Action for Peacekeeping initiative and also the perception that the force within MINUSMA was bunkerized. Some 9 months later, the Secretary General reported to the Security Council that the mission had reprioritized assets, freeing up resources for patrolling and enhancing the mobility and adaptability. And the patrolling was increased by some 120%. And in addition, the detection rate of IEDs was significantly improved. Following this report, a new mandate was adopted by the Security Council in June. It introduces a second strategic priority with a request to realign resources. MINUSMA now faces two demanding priorities, primarily to support the implementation of the peace accord in the north of Mali, while as a second priority, contribute to improving the situation in the central region, where violence against civilians has escalated. Since the adoption of the mandate, security conditions in Mali have continued to deteriorate. Against this backdrop, we are expected to do more with what we have, and it's clear that this approach has its limits. Our performance is conditioned by flexibility, agility, and robustness to concentrate forces in time and space for the fulfillment of the strategic priorities. While enhancing performance, we would still need more resources to be effective in pursuing the political objectives. As a force commander, I'm proud and pleased to note the professionalism and dedication amongst peacekeepers on a daily basis in a hostile environment where we are constantly being targeted by armed groups. Indeed, there is a lot of progress as to what we deliver on the ground. It is also important to note that the deterioration of the security situation is not a consequence of underperformance on the part of MINUSMA, but rather a reflection of the daunting challenges that Mali is confronted with. However, there is still room for improvement and enhancement of
our performance. In the military realm, the ability to perform is often subdivided into 3 distinct domains: physical, conceptual, and the moral domain. Firstly, we tend to focus on the physical component, including manpower, equipment, sustainability, infrastructure, training, etc. We do so not only because it's important, but because these elements are straightforward to quantify and to monitor. The performance or lack thereof is documented with regards to equipment status and training needs. While progress has been made in MINUSMA, it is clear that some problems have prevailed for many years, despite ardent support by partners. This may merit a review of incentives and accountability that goes beyond my purview as a force commander. Secondly, the conceptual domain relates to knowledge and understanding and the application of the guiding principles for employing forces. It deals with the doctrine, concepts, and planning and manuals. Given the fluid security environment and the need to be unpredictable vis-à-vis the hostile armed groups, the pace of change is rapid. Currently, we emphasize the ability to operate with a flexible and light footprint using temporary operating bases. In 6 months from now, the focus may be different. We may be called upon to do other tasks, including conducting combined operations with the redeploying Malian armed forces. However, the process for updating statement of unit requirements to update MOUs and adjust troop commitments to the realities on the ground is advanced at a different speed. This is a challenge that should merit for further analysis. Indeed, it's key for all stakeholders to understand the tailored application of peacekeeping in each mission. Arguably, it could facilitate reduction of caveats and constraints and thus allow us to be more flexible and efficient by employing the units according to the needs on the ground. Notably, despite the commitments made in Action for Peacekeeping, it is my experience that caveats continue to constrain performance. Thirdly, the moral component of performance relates to teamwork, spirit, values, and ethical conduct. This is the domain of performance that comes without the cost. It's about mindset. It's about being proactive, being professional, being self-confident and proud. Unfortunately, I have to say that there are units that lack this self-confidence, and even though they are superior in numbers and quality, they hesitate to stop armed movements, to enforce the mandate, or turn back when their freedom of movement are impeded, and they are reluctant to take risks in the face of imminent dangers for civilians. This must change, and it demands sound and dedicated leadership at all levels. While the unit level of performance evaluation is important in addressing some of these shortfalls, it is a holistic approach, embracing performance at all levels and in all pillars of a mission, including the logistical domain, that would truly make a difference. In MINUSMA, the Comprehensive Performance Assessment System, CPAS, has been introduced. It has the potential to become the backbone of the mission performance evaluation. More work will be needed to craft a systemic evaluation system which links CPAS with the various existing performance systems together in a holistic approach. Ladies and gentlemen, mindful that the word performance has different meanings, ranging from appearance and public displays to accomplishment and efficiency, it is our shared responsibility that performance in the name of UN peacekeeping will be associated with the latter. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Gillens, for those important insights. I now give the floor to our co-host, and with that, the Ambassador of Senegal.
Je vous remercie, Madame.
Thank you very much, President. I'd like at the outset to thank Ambassador Kelly Craft for having invited Senegal to participate in this important initiative, which offers a golden opportunity for the attendees to have a frank and constructive exchange on issues relating to the performance of our peacekeeping operations. This is a highly topical issue, and it is high time we were having this discussion. As indicated in the Declaration of Shared Commitments issued within the framework of the Action for Peacekeeping initiative, and as reaffirmed by the Security Council, most notably in its Resolution 2436 of 2018, the performance of peacekeeping operations is a joint responsibility held equally by all stakeholders. Senegal completely shares this vision and hails the fact that our collective conscience is being roused. As far as my country is concerned, the maintenance of peace is a collective undertaking, and its effectiveness depends to a large degree on the aggregate performance across all sectors of the different stakeholders acting at their various levels, but doing so interdependently rather than within mini fiefdoms. This is why Senegal, which deployed its first formed police unit, or FPU, in 2005, has always made a priority of allocating sufficient resources to ensure the units we dispatch to the field are well trained and properly equipped in order to guarantee high quality performance in the field. I will now share with you my views on 6 pillars or 6 levers for action that guide our philosophy, our mindset and our action when it comes to peacekeeping, and also guide our action in the field. And these all have to do with performance and assessing and measuring performance. Firstly, we have the human factor, and Senegal attaches major importance to the human factor when it comes to peacekeeping. In concrete terms, this means our primary focus is making sure we choose the right people to deploy, drawing them chiefly from mobile law and order intervention units or from special intervention brigades, and we do this to guarantee cohesion and high morale. I think it worth underscoring that the selection of command personnel also adheres to specific criteria. A unit thus constituted is then prepared for its task using the comprehensive tailored pre-deployment training and education program, varied to suit the type of unit being deployed, its missions, and the security environment of the theatre of action. Secondly is the choice of material, and we pay particularly close attention in our policy to the choice of material or equipment. This takes the guise of a full use of the Statement of Unit Requirements tool, which is systematically established on the basis of an analysis of the nature of the terrain and the threat. The mandatory generation of an equipment and environment report means we can deploy to each theatre the appropriate material. In terms of the acquisition of said material, said equipment, Senegal has a good record of disciplined procurement procedures and a robust partnership with credible local providers. This means we can respond to the demands of missions within the agreed timeframes, as seen most recently in the deployment of additional armoured vehicles to our FPUs in MINUSMA and MONUSCO, as well as the transformation of our Special Protection Unit, or PSU in MINUSCA, into a formed police unit, or FPU. Moreover, we believe high-performance autonomous logistical support is crucial for guaranteeing that deployed contingents can maintain their standards of operational readiness. Achieving that goal, as far as Senegal is concerned, the first step is full familiarity with the equipment to be used and a perfect mastery of the supply chains and the process chain for the maintenance of key material. A high-quality autonomous logistical support must also guarantee the well-being of personnel deployed, vital for them to perform to their peak and for keeping up morale. That is why Senegal dedicates considerable efforts during the rotation of units to reviewing and addressing the needs and shortfalls as identified by the leadership of outgoing contingents, and in allocating a special budget to plug those shortfalls for the commanders of incoming contingents. Senegal is also firmly committed to boosting the number of women deployed on the basis of the gender sectoral policy aimed at increasing the number of women in the ranks of our defence and security services. The rollout of this policy with the technical and financial support of partners such as Canada within the framework of the ELSI initiative, has allowed us to reach a level at which women make up 8% of our defence and security forces currently. The third pillar or lever is addressing the eradication of sexual exploitation and abuse, or SEA. And the eradication of SEA is and will remain one of our key priorities. To that end, effort is focused on prevention, delivered via ongoing awareness raising and the promotion of a sense of individual responsibility, but also encompassing the imposition on a systematic basis of appropriate sanctions and punishments for anyone who breaches the related code of conduct on sexual exploitation and abuse and the avoidance of same. And the final pillar or lever, and this is a crucial one, is partnerships. Under this heading, Senegal also benefits from the support of several partners, in particular the United States of America, who are a long-standing partner when it comes to assistance in pre-deployment training and the provision of equipment and material for our units. As proof of this fruitful relationship, the Senegalese police force recently received from the US Department of State a sizable batch of material enough to entirely equip one of our FPUs under the Peacekeeping Capability Readiness system. This has allowed us to strengthen our capacity in terms of the training and equipment and to today operate more autonomously. And this gives me a perfect opportunity to thank the American government, in particular the Department of State, represented today by the Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs, Mr. Rene Clark Cooper, for their unflagging support. In conclusion, I would say that the example of operational preparedness and readiness of the Senegalese police units could act as a blueprint, given that our model has positioned us to stand today as the leading police contributing country, or PCC, with 7 FPUs in the field and a special weapons and tactics team with a proven performance record. To this end, Senegal stands ready to share its good practices with any interested country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I now give the floor to France, the ambassador from France. Thank you.
France welcomes the fact that the Secretariat has tackled this question head-on following the Santos Cruz report and the adoption of Resolution 2436. Troop performance assessment measures have been set up to objectively evaluate and specifically evaluate everybody's performance. Significant progress has already been seen in the performance of some PKOs. Now that the tools are in place, there's a need to move to the implementation phase. In this spirit, France supported the strengthening of the performance evaluation mechanisms during the renewal of the mandate of MINUSCA, the deployment of the CPAS system in several operations is furthermore a welcome stage. I would just like to make 3 proposals from the standpoint of continuing to improve evaluation. First and foremost, all the troop performance assessment measures need to ensure that priority be given to evaluation by the force commander and, without mentioning those troops who report shortcomings, specific information need to be given regularly to the Security Council. The informal meeting of the 18th of November was extremely important, and that should be repeated. The Secretariat should also stipulate which measures have been taken in terms of flagging the issues to the specific contributing countries and what the timeline is for correcting the situation. That would give us a better idea of what stumbling blocks there are and what needs to be done to overcome them. Performance measures are pointless if they are not accompanied by appropriate training. And so this needs to be done upstream. Thanks to robust evaluation measures at these different stages, we can have satisfactory results and avoid weak links. There's also a need to really look at the question of evaluating civilian staff and the issue of the possibility of the imposition of disciplinary measures. That is a weak link in performance today. Whilst improving the effectiveness of PKOs, close has to involve better integration of the civilian and military components of missions. Consequently, the quality of the performance of civilians is just as important as that of troops. There's a need to move on from having arrangements and actually focus on corrective measures decided by the Secretariat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I now give the floor to the Ambassador from the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and let me also thank colleagues not only from the US, but also from India, Portugal, Senegal, Uruguay and Vietnam for hosting this event today, and to Ambassador Kelly Craft and the Secretary General for their leadership. Peacekeeping is, I think, one of the UN's greatest and most renowned achievements. Together, our peacekeepers, troops, police and civilians are deployed across 13 peacekeeping missions, attempting to bring security and stability to millions of people. And for some, blue helmets are the only protection they have. The presence of so many colleagues here today reflects our commitment to the task of enhancing performance in peacekeeping. And we should always remember, Madam Chairman, that there are two sides to addressing this. The first is timely recognition of outstanding performance, highlighting best practices and promoting widespread adoption. We rightly recognize selfless acts of courage, for example, through the Captain MBA Diagni Medal, and we should continue to find further ways to recognize achievements. The second is acting decisively to address performance concerns on those occasions when personnel do not meet both the standards that we expect and that those they are deployed to serve rightly deserve. Failures of performance can lead to lost lives, including those of our peacekeepers. Advancing the performance agenda requires working in partnership to improve peacekeeping for the benefit of all. Last year, the Secretariat, Member States, and regional organizations endorsed a declaration of shared commitments, pledging to implement the Secretary-General's Action for Peacekeeping vision. The Security Council also unanimously adopted Resolution 2436, and both of these focus on making peacekeeping fit for the 21st century. In endorsing the declaration and adopting the resolution, the United Kingdom set out our expectations for a more transparent and data-driven approach to peacekeeping, with clear and well-defined benchmarks leading to better reporting to the Council and to Member States. More rigorous performance assessment, including of mission leadership, with appropriately calibrated measures to tackle performance issues when needed, and at the same time, identifying further options to recognise, replicate and incentivise excellence. Madam Chairman, we all have our part to play. The United Kingdom is actively implementing the performance agenda as a troop contributor, including through our deployment next year of 250 troops to Mali, MINUSMA, as a training partner, a peacekeeping budget contributor, and a Security Council penholder. We continue to support the rollout of the comprehensive performance assessment system and other tools that will collate and track the information needed to better inform decision makers as part of an integrated performance policy framework. By implementing Resolution 2436 in full and following up our shared commitments, we will better protect civilians and create the conditions for sustainable peace. Today's discussion is very welcome, and the United Kingdom looks forward to working with others here to make it a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the Ambassador of Canada.
Madam Chair, Monsieur Lacroix, I would like to begin by thanking the United States of America, Ambassador Kraft and their team for organizing today's event. Merci aussi au Vietnam, à l'Uruguay.
I'd also like to thank Vietnam, Uruguay, Portugal and India for co-sponsoring and co-hosting this event. In particular, thanks to Senegal, who are co-hosting of this discussion in session 2 on how we can improve the evaluation of performance.
Valuable insights from my colleagues on the evaluation of the performance of military peacekeepers. I'd like to focus on considerations for improving performance evaluation for police and corrections personnel. Unfortunately, the police and corrections elements of peacekeeping operations are often an afterthought, or at best, an extension of the military component of these operations. But police and corrections are an essential part of multi-jurisdictional complex missions. Police and corrections personnel are crucial to the successful implementation of mandates of peace operations and in building trust with communities. They bring their expertise to capacity building for host countries and, critically, to ensure effective transitions between all stages of a peacekeeping operation. Performance evaluation cannot simply be an extension of evaluation of military components, and performance evaluation must go from start to finish. First, pre-deployment. Member states and the Secretariat need a common understanding of the mandated tasks for police and correction officials and standards of implementation. This is why Canada is working with the UN Police Division and other partners, including the African Union, Nigeria, Nepal, Senegal, China, Fiji, and Brazil, to finalize one of the curriculums of the UN Police Training Architecture Program. When completed, the program will provide clear and common metrics for assessment of individual police officers and police units, both in pre-deployment training and following deployment. A similar architecture could be developed for corrections officers. Deuxièmement,
secondly, in the field, evaluations cannot be put off until the end of a given operation. We need tools to evaluate on a clear and regular basis the performance both of individuals and of entire formed police units, or FPUs. We need to remedy existing shortfalls, particularly in terms of training in the field. The program for the training of United Nations police units shall contain a common set of norms and standards. It will take into account mitigating factors such as resources, changes in mandate and task, and existing operational conditions. And finally, I would turn my attention to post-deployment reviews and evaluations. The assessment of results of efforts for capacity building is a critical component of performance evaluation. But this task also requires the Member States and the Secretariat to be willing to put forward innovative approaches and to address intersectoral considerations and issues.
Corrections is currently leading on one such initiative approach, the training of corrections services on effective practices for gender-responsive treatment of women prisoners. Canada, along with Sweden and other Member States, is pleased to support the leadership of Burkina Faso on this work as chair of the group of friends. In closing, evaluations of police and corrections personnel need to be well integrated into performance evaluation of all components of peace operations. It is only together, through partnership and community engagement, that we can be most effective. Together, we can sustain meaningful progress towards a standard of excellence in peace operation. Merci.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I now give the floor to the Ambassador of South Korea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for convening this meeting. And I also thank Monsieur Lacroix for the work of the Secretariat. With the growing responsibilities of the UN peacekeeping operations in increasingly challenging environments today, the widely endorsed Action for Peacekeeping initiative highlights the critical importance of improving the performance of peacekeeping. In this regard, today's high-level event and performance is timely and important. I will focus on the issue of evaluating and supporting the troop, and I will make 3 points. First, a thorough analysis of both the mandate and local context is the key. It is based on this in-depth analysis that the Secretariat should present to the troop and police contributing countries. This should not be a one-size-fits-all approach. The capacity of the Secretariat for data collection and analysis, planning and review is critical to this end. Second, all personnel, both civilian and military, should be properly trained and equipped. based on the requirements and threat assessments provided by the Secretariat. Peacekeepers should, in principle, be expected to excel in the basics and prepare to navigate unforeseen situations. In this regard, we see the value of strengthening the current process of verifying units' operational readiness before deployment. Consideration should be given to carrying out additional pre-deployment visits to the subsequent units deployed after the initial deployment. One of the pre-certified units are deployed in a timely manner. It was once. The senior leadership of the mission, including the force commander, should be responsible for making accurate assessments of the performance of all personnel and the mission as a whole. These assessments should be shared with the TCCs and PCCs and headquarters in New York in a timely manner. In this regard, we welcome the Secretariat's efforts to develop an integrated performance policy framework and comprehensive performance assessment system in accordance with Council Resolution 2436. By better assessing the whole of mission performance and capabilities, it would help to address capability gaps, take corrective action, and direct resources where most needed. We recognize that some TCCs, despite their strong commitment, may face limited resources in adequately training and equipping their peacekeepers. And we welcome the ongoing efforts to provide the relevant support to these TCCs through innovative approach, especially the light coordination mechanism. For the light coordination mechanism to be effective, however, it would be important for the Secretariat to clearly identify and present detailed needs of certain TCCs to the partnering countries. Third, Korea, as the host of the 2021 UN Peacekeeping Ministerial, is working closely with the co-chairs and relevant stakeholders so that the ministerial will result in substantive contributions to the strengthening UN peacekeeping by mobilizing tangible and concrete pledges. Thank you much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. This concludes our second session. Our third session will highlight partnerships between member states and the ways in which they build capacity. I would like to welcome the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs, who will speak about the U.S. partnerships with troop and police contributing countries. Assistant Secretary Cooper, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Secretary General. The United States government is deeply committed to United Nations peacekeeping as a critical tool for promoting international peace and stability and the protection of civilians. We salute the courageous work of troops and police who deploy with the UN to dangerous missions far from their families, far afield. To ensure this tool effectively serves its purpose, we seek strong leadership, performance, and accountability across UN missions. And we aim to ensure missions have the capabilities needed to address the increasingly complex challenges of modern peacekeeping. Reflective of our commitment, and as my friend and colleague, the U.S. Permanent Representative, Ambassador Kraft, had noted, the United States remains the largest financial contributor to UN peacekeeping, as well as the largest capacity-building contributor, reinforcing the ability of troop and police contributing countries to effectively train, deploy, and sustain peacekeeping forces in UN operations. Since 2005, the United States invested nearly $1.5 billion through our military and police peacekeeping capacity building initiatives alone. In fact, The annual budget for our U.S. Global Peace Operations Initiative increased over the last 3 years to over $70 million. These investments yielded demonstrative positive outcomes. Yet, sustained efforts in partnership with troop and police contributing countries and other capacity-building donors are required to further strengthen the effectiveness of UN operations. The United States is currently engaged in 54 bilateral peacekeeping partnerships, in addition to supporting a range of regional training courses and multilateral exercises. From piloting readiness exercises in Rwanda, to training a helicopter unit in El Salvador, or equipping an engineering company in Mongolia, the United States is investing in troop and police contributing country capabilities. Partnerships through our peacekeeping programs are long-term capacity-building relationships. We are invested, and we expect our partners to demonstrate the national commitment to invest in the preparation and sustainment of their peacekeeping forces, to include ensuring their troops and police are properly trained and equipped to operate in the difficult environments to which they are deploying. But even a robust training and equipment is insufficient in the absence of political will to enable readiness and to enhance performance. Troop and police contributing countries must ensure their peacekeepers meet UN performance standards and hold them to account if they do not. Equally, the United Nations and member states must be unwavering in demanding results in support of the UN mandate. In line with the unanimously adopted Security Council Resolution 2436, the UN must develop a transparent accountability framework encompassing troops, police, and as France noted, should include civilian components, with clear measures commensurate with the identified performance issue. All uniform and civilian personnel must know to what standards they are being held and the consequences for not meeting these standards. High performers must also be publicly recognized for their accomplishments and best practices shared. Earlier today, Secretary General Guterres noted that responsibility is of all member states and that performance is a collective responsibility. We agree. Underperformers must take responsibility for addressing shortfalls. This must hold true for failures to protect civilian populations, or worse, for sexually exploiting or abusing the very populations peacekeepers are deployed to protect. As called for by many member states today already, the UN and peacekeeping contributors must reinforce their commitment to uphold a zero-tolerance policy for SCA. And the Secretariat must be willing to take politically mature measures to ensure enforcement, including identifying remediation efforts, or if necessary, removing units from troop or police contributing countries that are unwilling to take these issues seriously. The expanded availability of peacekeeping units reinforces accountability efforts. Establishment of the UN's Peacekeeping Capability Readiness System, which has been referenced many times this morning, to register and validate the readiness of peacekeeping units represents a significant achievement. And with more than 200 capabilities now registered in the PCRS, and through U.S. capacity building programs, we are actively working to ensure units from partner countries are well-trained, adequately equipped, and bring the right mindset to execute mission tasks and uphold performance standards. Further, the United States is directly investing in the UN Secretariat's capacity to develop and implement performance evaluation frameworks for uniformed forces. These frameworks facilitate the compilation and analysis of objective data across a spectrum of performance factors. With this increased availability of both information and forces, the UN must be willing to enforce accountability through data-driven decisions about force generation and sustainment of forces and missions. The United States remains committed to investing in partnerships to enhance performance and accountability. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we call on the Secretariat and member states to deliberately and robustly implement UN Security Council Resolution 2436 to improve UN peacekeeping and collectively advance global peace and security. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Cooper. We very much appreciate that you were able to make the trip up from Washington. We are delighted to have Vietnam co-host with us and share about their Level 2 hospital in South Sudan. I give the floor now to the ambassador from Vietnam.
Thank you very much. And Vietnam is very happy to co-host this event. And as you know that in October last year, Vietnam sent the Level 2 hospital to South Sudan. And so far, they did a rather good job. It is UN assessment, not Vietnam. Yet, in providing more than 2,000 Medicare cases to the more than 2,000 cases. And from the standpoint of a troop contributing country, we will share a little bit about the partnership. So here I think that I would like to modelize into different things. At least we have to promote partnership in 4 channels, 3 stages and 2 areas. The 4 channels, first, is the partnership between Vietnam and the donor or helper. We have very good partnership and cooperation from the United States in preparing our troops, from UK, from Japan, and from Australia. So that's very good for the pre-deployment stage. And the second channel for partnership we should promote is the partnership between Vietnam and other troop contributing countries on the ground. Surrounding the Level 2 hospital, we have very good partnership with Mongolia, with Cambodia, with UK. They have the engineering company next door to the second Level 2 hospital of Vietnam. And the third channel, we need to have the partnership between Vietnam and South Sudan. Early this year, we signed the establishment of diplomatic relations between the 2 countries. And we have 3 visits at the deputy ministerial level to South Sudan. And we talk on the cooperation on the area like agriculture development. So very soon we're going to have 1 delegation from agriculture sector from South Sudan to come to Vietnam. So I think it's good. And the third channel of partnership we should promote with between Vietnam and UN system. The UN office on the ground, on Ban Tiêu area, and the UN office here on the issue. These 4 channels are very important. And 3 stages, I mean pre-deployment, during deployment, and also after deployment. Why after deployment? Because the troops, they come there for 1 year, they come back. We need to keep that technology that they accumulated, they learn by themselves during 1 year, because they will come there again. Or they can multiply their own experience with other people to come. Yeah, a kind of cycle. And the 2 areas I mean here, one is the hardware. We need equipment for training, equipment for operation. And in that sense, we thank for the United States to provide a lot of equipment for our Level 2 hospital. We see there. And software. Software, I mean information, including intelligence on the ground. Software including technology, training, technology transfer, training, and also software including a kind of advisory providing. So many things we needed. So these are a kind of modeling and good experience we have in the last years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I now give the floor to China, the Deputy Permanent Representative.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me begin by thanking the permanent missions of the United States, Senegal, Uruguay, Vietnam, India, and Portugal for co-hosting today's meeting. Since 1948, the blue helmet has become the symbol of the United Nations bringing peace and hope to the world. Facing the new situation and new challenges, UN peacekeeping needs to keep pace with the times and strive for continued development and innovation. China supports the A4P initiative put forward by Secretary General Guterres. Strengthening the performance of peacekeeping operations is closely linked and mutually reinforcing with improving operation mandates, enhancing capacity building, and forging partnerships. Improving operation mandate is the foundation. The mandate of peacekeeping operations needs to be realistic and actionable, backed up by targeted measures to avoid trying to be everything everywhere. As political settlement is the focus, prioritizing political settlement needs to cut across the life cycle of each peacekeeping operation. No matter how the situation evolves, we need to stay committed to the basic principles governing peacekeeping operations. Enhancing capacity building is the key. TCCs are the main actors in peacekeeping. The international community should pay serious attention to the actual needs of TCCs, especially developing countries, and provide equipment, funding, and other resources that are equal to the fulfillment of mandates. The UN Secretariat should develop uniform standards for the organization, training, and supervision of peacekeepers. While strengthening peacekeeping performance is necessary to ensure the safety and security of peacekeepers. Through the China UN Peace and Development Fund, the Peacekeeping Affairs Center of the Chinese Ministry of National Defense, and the China Peacekeeping Police Training Center, China has been actively supporting developing TCCs in capacity building. And it is necessary to back it up with strong partnerships. Host countries, TCCs, and FCCs should form synergy. The United Nations should also continue to deepen its cooperation with regional and sub-regional organizations. Africa is the focus of UN peacekeeping operations. The AU-owned peace operations tell us positive stories about African solutions to African problems. China supports the UN in providing sustainable and predictable financial support to these operations. Peace and security has become one of the priorities in China-Africa cooperation. China will continue to provide assistance to the AU in support of its initiative to silence the gun by 2020. In conclusion, I also like to emphasize that in evaluating the performance of peacekeeping operation, we need indicators for both peace and development. Peacekeeping operations, just as much as to help countries out of conflicts, need to create safe and stable environments for host countries to achieve poverty eradication and promote peace through development to secure sustainable peace. As the second largest financial contributor to UN peacekeeping and the largest TCC among P5, we stand ready to continue working with all countries to promote a greater role of UN peacekeeping. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I now give the floor to Indonesia.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chairman, I thank the United States and all co-hosts for organizing this very important high-level event on peacekeeping performance. Allow me also to extend my appreciation to the Secretary General for his very clear and comprehensive opening remarks. The UN peacekeeping continues to be one of the best representations of the United Nations ideals. Many times, it has been the only answer to the hope of disheveled communities to reclaim normal life. Indonesia commends the brave women and men in UN peacekeeping for their indispensable work. As the world confronts more complex security challenges, it is critical that the Blue Helmets continue to maintain the highest standard of performance. To this end, partnership is key. In this context, I would like to share the following points. First, improving peacekeeping performance is a collective responsibility. All peacekeeping stakeholders, without exception, must fulfill their responsibilities to ensure that the peacekeepers are doing their best in the discharge of their mandates. Performance standards in the field must apply to all components of the mission, uniform as well as civilian personnel. Second, The starting point to assess performance should be peacekeeping mandates, which must be clear, specific, realistic, and achievable. Furthermore, necessary and adequate resources in the forms of material, financial, and political supports must also be matched with the mandates. Peacekeepers and the communities that they serve will always be at risk and in harm's way if the peacekeepers have to do more with less. It is vital, therefore, that the troops and police contributing countries are consulted meaningfully and regularly throughout all mission stages. Third, continued training and capacity building of peacekeepers are essential for high-performance standards. Training must go beyond basic military and policing skills. Building on the experiences of Indonesian peacekeepers, we emphasize engagement with local communities. Gaining of their trust is critical to the success of peacekeeping missions. To perform these tasks, peacekeepers should be trained in soft skills such as understanding of local language, culture, and effective communication techniques. Better partnership and collaboration are needed to provide better training. In this context, Indonesia will host triangular partnership projects in 2020. We are currently working with Ethiopia and Australia to explore the possibility of peacekeeping co-deployments. Indonesia, as one of the largest troops and police contributing countries in 9 different missions, remains committed to contributing in our collective efforts to improve the UN peacekeeping performance. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I now give the floor to Egypt. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to begin by thanking our host country, the President of Security Council for this month, and our co-hosts for organizing today's event on a very important topic for all peacekeeping stakeholders. Improving peacekeeping performance has been indeed one of the topics which has witnessed a lot of progress. But yet, where also much more remains to be done. One of the areas where there is still room for improvement is partnerships, such as those involving the Secretariat and the TCCs and PCCs, countries providing training and capacity building support, as well as the host countries. Partnerships should be enhanced with a view of improving peacekeeping operations. In this regard, as Egypt is one of the major TCCs and PCCs, including in one of the most risky peacekeeping missions, MINUSMA in sisterly Mali, I would like to share briefly our view on improving performance of peacekeeping operations through partnerships, as conceived in the Cairo Roadmap for enhancing performance of peacekeeping operations, which resulted from a conference Egypt hosted in November 2018, and also benefited from a wide range of consultations with various stakeholders, including ex-UN officials and think tanks and academia, aiming at contributing to the effective implementation of the SG's initiative Action for Peace. The increasing complexity of the operational realities for peacekeeping on the ground calls for a review of whole of mission performance to ensure better design and delivery of peacekeeping from mandate to exit. This essentially means that there is a need for a clear political strategy to support mandate implementation embedded in a comprehensive vision to achieving and sustaining peace. This is a critical indicator for measuring the effectiveness of peacekeeping and for defining its continued and context-specific relevance. In this vein, partnerships between international and regional organizations are so pertinent as the enhanced partnership between the United Nations and the African Union. The Cairo Roadmap redefines performance to reflect the broad spectrum of responsibilities and commitments underpinning the A4P initiative and the Declaration of Shared Commitments. The Cairo Roadmap places particular emphasis on primacy of field-generated analysis based on a robust and extensive consultative process between mission leadership, host countries, and troop and police contributing countries, and where relevant regional actors and organizations, hence presenting the new concept of quadrilateral cooperation, including Security Council, Secretariat, TCCs and PCCs, as well as the host countries who are often forgotten in this process. And this is where partnerships feature most within the Cairo Roadmap. The outcome and recommendations emanating from such analysis should inform the headquarters and the Security Council's consideration of mandate review, force reconfiguration, and or drawdown and exit. The roadmap, therefore, places operational and technical capacities and preparedness on equal footing with the question of the primacy of politics and the essential contribution of peacekeeping operations to the resolution of conflict and efforts to build and sustain peace. It also addresses the increasing pressure on financing and resourcing the whole range of peacekeeping mandate elements and components. Hence, partnerships provide a broad-based coalition of stakeholders conducive to sustainable support and enhancement of peacekeeping efforts. To conclude, Madam President, enhancing performance is a collective effort and a collective responsibility that requires clear, sequenced, achievable, and well-resourced mandates, clear political strategy, in addition to well-equipped and trained peacekeepers. In this context, the scope and nature of the conversation with troop and police contributing countries and the host countries must evolve to take on a strategic dimension that makes them real partners in efforts aimed at ensuring the peacekeeping operations meet their strategic aspirations and objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I now give the floor to the Ambassador of Japan.
Madam Chair and Mr. Co-Chairs, well, today I would like to highlight three approaches to facilitating partnership for the better delivery of peacekeeping training and capacity building, which are triangular partnerships, the light coordination mechanism, and support for national peacekeeping training centers. Number one, triangular partnerships. Triangular partnerships are a model to bring together three critical actors in peacekeeping training and capacity building, namely the troop and the police contributing countries, member states with particular expertise, and UN Secretariat. Under this model, training and capacity building can better address capability gaps in peacekeeping missions. The UN Secretariat has a wealth of information about the challenges and needs on the ground, and strong engagement by the Secretariat in the design of training and capacity building enables us to meet the requirements of the field missions. The UN Triangular Partnership Project has trained more than 400 uniformed engineers from African and Asia-Pacific TCCs and some 5,000 uniformed signal personnel to date. In addition, the project also successfully completed the first pilot training of the UN Field Medical Assistance course in October. The launch of this medical training has been triggered by the pressing reality that improvements in medical capacity on the ground are urgently needed. We believe that this is a good illustration of the advantages offered by triangular partnerships. Number two, light coordination mechanism. While triangular partnerships emphasize the role of the United Nations Secretariat as a training designer, the light coordination mechanism enhances the effectiveness of training and capacity building in a bilateral context. We welcome the operationalization of this mechanism and hope that it will be utilized to better match the training needs of T and PCCs with the specific expertise of member states who are willing to provide support. Number three, support for national peacekeeping training centers. Finally, support for national peacekeeping training centers is also an important channel to facilitate partnerships. Japan has partnered with peacekeeping training institutes in 15 African countries. providing financial assistance amounting to $100 million in total, and dispatching experts to provide lectures and assist with curriculum development. These peacekeeping training centers not only provide training to their own peacekeepers, but also serve as regional hubs to share best practices and expertise with regional partners. In conclusion, Japan is ready to continue our support for peacekeeping training and capacity building through various channels and looks forward to continued collaboration with our partners. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I now give the floor to Morocco, to the Ambassador from Morocco, to conclude this session. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I would like to start by thanking the U.S. Presidency of the Security Council, as well as the missions of India, Portugal, Senegal, Uruguay, and Vietnam, for organizing this high-level debate on performance, an important element of contemporary peacekeeping. Given the importance of this issue, Morocco is organizing an international seminar next week on performance, with participants representing the Secretariat, TPCs, as well as peacekeeping practitioners. I would like also to reiterate our full support to the A4P initiative launched by the Secretary General and endorsed by the overwhelming majority of UN member states. We can already see the palpable and positive results of this initiative on UN peacekeeping, in particular on the issue of performance. With peacekeeping missions becoming increasingly complex, a high level of performance has become a vital necessity, including from safety and security point of view, notwithstanding our obligation as TPCCs to fulfill our mandate that we voluntarily pledged to achieve. I would like to focus my intervention today on the third question, regarding what actions can the Secretariat and Member States take to improve partnership between TPCCs and providers of training and capacity building support. From the Secretariat's side, to which we express our sincere thanks for all their efforts and achievements, we welcome the ongoing efforts aiming at strengthening the light coordination mechanism. We think that the Secretariat is uniquely placed to identify gaps and propose solutions. For example, Morocco was proposed to engage in a comprehensive program in order to reinforce the capacity of another African TPCC. Morocco gladly accepted this task. It is important to share our experience in peacekeeping accumulated after more than 60 years of participation in UN peacekeeping. Morocco has also recently been strongly involved in the Triangular Partnership Program. For us, this program was a good opportunity to reach more partners. Usually, Morocco would lend its support on bilateral basis, depending on the various military agreements signed with partners. Engaging in the Triangular program allowed Morocco to reach more beneficiaries and to target their specific needs, an important aspect of training often neglected. We organized in Morocco a workshop for peacekeeping planners in September, and we are preparing to organize 2 workshops, one on engineering and one on medical in the coming months. Hand in hand with the service in charge of this Triangular Partnership Program, we already identify the gaps, and we are focusing our effort on strengthening the capacity of Francophone TPCCs. In addition to this program, Morocco will continue to offer its expertise to all countries interested, based, as I mentioned, on our long experience in peacekeeping, but also in line with the principles of solidarity that guides the foreign policy of the kingdom. Morocco is also engaged in innovative programs like the mobile training teams, deploying a few teams in several peacekeeping missions. My country is provider of training, but it is also a recipient of training. Based on its strong cooperation with its allies, Many joint exercises are organized every year in my country. African Lion with the United States Army is one of the most important ones. Finally, I would like to underline the importance of the role of the Secretariat in identifying the needs and who can fulfill them. We reiterate our full commitments to the highest standards of conduct and performance and look forward to the improvement of peacekeeping overall. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. This now concludes our third session, and our last session of the day will focus on the next steps in improving high-level performance. Under Secretary General Lacroix, we look forward to hearing from you on the next steps in implementing Security Council Resolution 2436. The floor is yours.
I would like to thank the United States as well as India, Portugal, Senegal, Uruguay, and Vietnam for convening today's important meeting. Improving the concrete, measurable impact we have on the ground is our highest priority. It is at the core of everything we're trying to achieve through Action for Peacekeeping. I would like to start by expressing my sincerest gratitude to all troop and police contributing countries. They make sacrifices every day where our beneficiaries need them most. As the Secretary General conveyed earlier, in the past 2 years, the United Nations has accomplished and learned a lot in regard to strengthening performance. Security Council Resolution 2436 has been an essential guide. And I thank our member states for their support to our efforts. And I would like to thank our colleagues at HQ and in the field for their dedication and commitment to these efforts. In line with Action for Peacekeeping and Resolution 2436, we have strengthened our preparedness. This includes pre-deployment evaluation that validates military skills. The assessment tools the Secretary General spoke to are enabling us to more comprehensively and holistically evaluate the military and police components of peacekeeping operations. They are also informing more tailored action, allowing us to engage troop and police contributing countries and capacity building partners even more effectively. They are facilitating more informed decision-making, including through regular performance meetings that I chair. When faced with underperformance, we have and will not hesitate to take remedial action, including full or partial repatriation where necessary. Strengthening performance and the safety and security of UN peacekeepers is one and the same. Through the action plan on improving the security of peacekeepers, we made progress on changing mindset, increasing mobility, reactivity, and reducing the number of peacekeepers lost. We are rolling out UN peacekeeping intelligence, but still have further to go to make sure that the decision-making of all is informed by the best information available. This is all critical to our efforts to strengthen the protection of civilians. Yet, improving responsiveness also requires that we have the requisite capabilities, including air assets, quick reaction forces, and specialized enabling capacities. Our accomplishments are notable, but today I would like to speak more to what we will be doing going forward. To see and read more about what we have achieved through strengthening our performance, I encourage you to look at this two-pager on the A4P page of the UN Peacekeeping website. I have it with me. It's a bit large, so probably easier to consult online. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we implement Action for Peacekeeping, we're also seeing how much more needs to be done. Engaging communities is essential to mandate delivery. To truly know how best to manage and resolve conflict, we must speak to and listen carefully to the people suffering through it. It is equally critical for the situation awareness of our missions. In some places, such as in Beni, DR Congo, where I just returned from, the trust of the population has deteriorated, and we need to reinvigorate our efforts. Globally, disinformation has become a threat, one that can lead to significant instability and even losses of human life. This is a challenge we must collectively tackle, including with the private sector. I look forward to collaborating with you on this. Equally, on strengthening performance and accountability across military, police, and civilian components, we have more to do. As already mentioned by the Secretary General, in cooperation with troop and police contributing countries, we plan to build a framework to better systematize performance evaluation and accountability. We will enhance every link in the chain of standards, selection, evaluations, recognition of outstanding performance, remedial action, and accountability. We're laying the foundations. In 2019, we put in place 700 standards for military components. We will finalize the standards and benchmarks for all units in 2020. We will also further refine and tailor our in-mission evaluations and ensure that every force commander, police commissioner, and evaluated unit has a performance improvement plan. We will put in place a new system to evaluate force and sector headquarters. Together, this will enable close tracking and monitoring of pre-deployment preparations through in-mission performance. It will also better enable us to provide improvement recommendations through standardized processes. In 2020, we will complete the rollout of the comprehensive performance evaluation system, and this will give us a much better picture of mandate delivery across mission components. All peacekeepers must adhere to our standards of performance. If our peacekeepers, leadership, civilian, police, or military fall short of these standards, then they must be held accountable. And this includes for upholding the high standards of conduct and discipline. For sexual exploitation and abuse specifically, one case is one too many. We will continue to do our utmost to uphold the Secretary General's zero-tolerance policy, and for that we need the strong support of our member states. In closing, I would like to underscore that we will continue to count on your support. Improving the effectiveness of peacekeeping operations is a collective undertaking. It starts with well-tailored and prioritized mandates. We appreciate the Security Council's support in this regard. To effectively implement our mandates, all have a role, the military, police, and civilians at all levels, particularly leadership. Ensuring that peacekeepers have the requisite training capacity, in many cases, entails member states providing the requisite support, including through bilateral or trilateral partnership initiatives. Ultimately, we also require the requisite financing to effectively carry out our mandates. Each aspect of strengthening peacekeeping will continue to rely on all of us working together towards common objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Undersecretary General Lacroix. We are pleased to hear about the Secretary General's and your intention to implement an accountability framework on 2436. We now turn to our final co-host, India. We were very happy that India agreed to co-sponsor this event with us, as they do an excellent job of generating forces for peacekeeping, ensuring their most capable and willing troops are deployed. I now give the floor to the Ambassador of India.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The presence of so many representatives here is testimony that peacekeeping is a unique innovation of multilateralism, for it brings a variety of stakeholders to collectively respond to threats to international peace and security. India therefore appreciates the initiative of the US mission to address the translation of political directives for enhancing peacekeeping performance into technical outputs. We are happy to join Portugal, Senegal, Uruguay, and Vietnam as cohorts, along with the US, in today's event. India believes that while broad participation in peacekeeping is important to enhance global solidarity, there can be no substitute for professional competence of those engaged in all aspects of this global enterprise. I will focus on the way forward to achieving better performance by addressing practices of force generation. Force generation in the UN peacekeeping is based on three major policy documents or guidelines: Operational Readiness Assurance and Performance Improvement Policy, Peacekeeping Capability Readiness Systems, the rapid deployment level of the PCRS, or the Peacekeeping Capability Readiness System. These have evolved over a period of time. Hence, if we have to meet growing challenges, we also need to acknowledge existing gaps in order to address them and generate the right force needed for peacekeeping. Let me highlight three specific points. First, the performance improvement cycle, as explained in the Operational Readiness Assurance Policy, is a shared multi-stakeholder exercise. It has 4 stages: shaping, preparation, delivery, and learning. All of these aim to help us to continuously improve the standards of peacekeeping. Yet, the quarterly Uniformed Capability Requirement paper of August 2019 mentions that the force commanders acknowledged to the Office of the Peacekeeping Strategic Partnership and special investigations that not all contingents are operationally ready when deployed. The absence of minimal operational standards as a benchmark that all contingents meet when deployed is a collective requirement that warrants collective action. We need to seriously look at the learning cycle to finding practical ways to achieve this. Second, the guidelines require the peacekeeping capability readiness system should be the sole mechanism for the selection of a military or police unit for deployment. The 4 distinctive levels, level 1, 2, 3, and rapid deployment level, are meant to indicate a natural progression of readiness for deployment. A diversity in terms of deployment needs is understandable, and some variations are inevitable. However, choices and selections need to be made from within the same spectrum of options. Those not part of the PCRS are best avoided. Similarly, preference of units from level 1 of the PCRS for deployment when units at level 3 and RDL are available undermines due diligence of the states involved in updating their contributions to higher levels. In selection, units without caveats should have precedence over units pledged with caveats, as these will not tie down the hands of force commanders in operational decisions. In short, we need to have a selection policy that is a natural extension of the PCRS to ensure that the most ready, most capable, well-equipped, and willing contingents are selected for deployment. Third, instances of underperformance need to be assessed. Such assessment needs to examine whether there were units available at higher level in the PCRS that were overlooked during selection, whether caveats have impacted performance, whether poor performance is due to lack of resources, including equipment, or whether the mandate itself, including guidelines, were not clear, resulting in unsatisfactory implementation. Honest assessment and feedback is essential to have an effective accountability system. Assessing performance without determining accountability will leave us open to repeating errors again and again. Finally, may I highlight some practical example of our own efforts in support of improving performance prior to deployment in UN peacekeeping. India supports member state-to-member state partnership initiatives as they reflect practical ways to share UN peacekeeping experience and prepare together for partnership in UN peacekeeping. We have successfully co-deployed troops from Kazakhstan as part of our own battalion in UNIFIL in Lebanon. To ensure smooth induction, Kazakh troops undertook extensive pre-deployment training with their Indian counterparts. India, in partnership with the United States, co-hosts the UN peacekeeping course for African partners with special focus on capacity building and peacekeeping. The US and India have also deployed joint mobile training teams to Zambia for conducting training in peacekeeping. Following this, we feel that mobile training teams and training of trainers by pooling instructors from member states is a useful initiative. We are undertaking such efforts also for partners from the ASEAN and Central Asia. Madam Chair, working in partnerships is key to successful peacekeeping. We are happy to contribute to such partnerships as this event and hope it will make a contribution in strengthening the culture of performance in peacekeeping as part of our collective efforts under the Action for Peace initiative that all of us are committed to. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, very much for those remarks. I now give the floor to the Ambassador of Italy.
And thank you to the US for organizing this important meeting. I also want to thank our friends from Vietnam, Uruguay, Senegal, Portugal, and India, and of course the Secretary General for his observations this morning, and the Secretariat, because we have noticed an increased commitment precisely on performance of the peacekeeping operation, and I think we have to underline that, so thank you for that. Let me first remind that Italy is the largest contributor of peacekeepers in the group of Western European and other group. We are very proud of our important contribution. We are proud of our peacekeepers. We also provide the command of UNIFIL, which is an important mission in a very delicate area. So also for these reasons, we are fully committed to improve the performance of the peacekeeping operation. And looking at Resolution 2436, I would like to focus my remarks on three aspects to enhance the performance of PKO: protection of civilians, training, and technology. Also, I want to say that I could really support many of the very interesting observations that has been made by colleagues up to now. On protection of civilians, the Kigali Principle and the Vancouver Principle should be fully implemented by peace operations, especially as regards child protection. This must be a priority. Member States and the Secretariat should ensure accountability mechanisms are set up for POC implementation, notably through revised term of reference, appraisal evaluation systems, and reporting and investigation mechanism of protection of civilians implementation. Member States should also support initiatives aiming at mitigating the risk of civilian harm and serious violation of international humanitarian and human rights law. In particular, Member States should mandate and resource missions to regularly issue protection of civilians reports. On training, training and capacity building activities should not be viewed as a one-off activity, but rather as a tool to enhance operational effectiveness throughout the mission life cycle, calibrated to the specific context of every mission. Italy welcomes the multi-form mechanism established by DPO to coordinate and share information on training activities and gaps. Tools such as the light coordination mechanism, the peacekeeping capabilities readiness system, and the uniform capabilities requirement go in the right direction. Steady dialogue between the UN Secretariat and TCC and PCC, as well as among TCC and PCC and their own training centers, is essential. A fruitful and articulate cooperation is already in place with the UN and several member states. Over the past years, our military training centers like the COESPU in Vicenza, the Post-Conflict Operations Study Center in Turin, and the Security Force Assistance Center of Excellence located near Rome have provided specialized training and capacity building to well over 10,000 military and police officers from 118 countries and 17 international organizations. The Italian training pledges for 2019 encompass a wide range of courses for more than 700 military and police units. And lastly, technology. As the Secretary General said this morning in his remarks, technology is also key to increase the safety and security of peacekeepers and their performance. As a true contributing country, we are very concerned about the safety and security of blue helmets, and we consider the Santos Cruz report and its action plan, as well as the independent mission reviews, timely and opportune measures. The use of unmanned UAVs in MONUSCO has provided enhanced situational awareness to the mission and played a fundamental role for the safety and security of peacekeepers, as well as for the protection of civilians and humanitarian actors. Let me also recall the creation by Italy and Bangladesh of the Group of Friends on the management of the environmental impact of field missions throughout their life cycle as an example of an innovative approach to the PKO performance on the ground. And we should not forget logistics. The capacity for operation to deliver and accomplish their mandates is closely related to the swiftness of deployment and to the operational effectiveness of field missions. Italy provides full support to the UN Global Service Center located in Brindisi, which is a fundamental hub providing logistic support to peacekeeping missions around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for those remarks. I now give the floor to Germany. Ambassador.
Thanks very much. Thanks to all the hosts for organizing the event today. I think it's a very timely one, and there is, of course, room or space to congratulate us what has been achieved, but we have to be honest. I must say, when I read the reports about what happened in the DRC in Beni with the peacekeepers, with the protection of civilians or non-protection of civilians, I found this rather shocking. And of course, the circumstances were special. And but we have to admit that yes, my Italian colleague just mentioned the cruise report. A lot has been done, but there remains a lot of things to do. I think we cannot pretend as if all the recommendations of the cruise report are implemented, and therefore we have to continue to work on this and not be too self-congratulatory. So I could repeat most of what has been said. Actually, from Mariangela's speaking notes, I could copy and paste. So I'll be quick and just say a few words first, or 3 main points for us that are important. First, on protection of civilians and sexual exploitation and abuse. I can only repeat here, as I always also do in the Security Council, we have to be sure that we safeguard human rights. If we don't do that, we will not be able to keep and sustain peace. So in our training and in our actions, in operations of our peacekeepers, we have to not allow for compromise, and we have to have a comprehensive training on human rights and accountability for the actions. The second point, very important, has been said here, to underline the participation of women in all peace process, but also the participation of women in all peacekeeping operations, peacekeepers, police. They are the ones who have good contact with the local communities better. They also, when it comes to trust building, women peacekeepers are just better, and they should do. I always say when we have in Germany these soccer matches with lots of rivalries between the supporters, women are much better in controlling the crowds than men are, and this is something we also think could do more in general. Protection of civilians. This is, of course, priority of host countries, but it's also, of course, for the missions, and there we need a holistic support, the whole mission, the military, the police, and the civilians. We have to prepare the personnel that goes out, so when somebody goes to Eastern Congo, they have to understand what the conflicts are about, and they have to understand the local conflict, and they have to completely adhere to UN standards and the police. Now, on evaluation and accountability, there we have to, as I said at the beginning, there has to be a blunt analysis of maybe if something goes wrong, and there has to be a responsibility for the TCC, PCCs, and but also the UN as well. We have to have targeted reviews and frank assessments. And we support, for this as a background, the strategic guidance framework for international police peacekeeping. This is one example of our commitment and contribution to this effort. And effectiveness of our operations can be only measured based on clear expectations and standards, and only then stakeholders can be held accountable. So we should follow this route. Training partnerships. We believe that partnering, training, capacity, mutually defining each other. Training is a cornerstone, and therefore we believe that a solid set of strong curricula is the basis for successful training. We therefore support a number of military and police curricula projects, especially the holistic review of the police training architecture. And last, we have strengthened the training capacity building nexus in recent years through a wide range of bilateral training activities. In 2020, we will step up our training efforts and consult with interest member states, including A4P champions, on upcoming activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for those remarks. I now give the floor to the Ambassador from the Dominican Republic.
Thank you very much, President. Thanks also go to all of the co-sponsors of this very important event this morning. And we'd also like to express our gratitude to Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix for his briefing and for the recommendations he shared with us. Today's high-level meeting gives us a welcome chance to identify and properly apprehend shortcomings and challenges when it comes to the implementation of Resolution 2436, but also those shortcomings and challenges related to our commitments to the Action for Peacekeeping framework. For this reason, we fervently hope this will not be the last such fora for dialogue of this type, but rather the start of continued engagement along these lines, even if it is in an informal setting, bringing together first and foremost TCCs and PCCs, so as to heighten consistency for better performance in missions. One way of tackling the gaps in the implementation of Resolution 2436 is through actively sharing best practices and lessons learned when it comes to training and to protection mandates, so that successful models might be emulated by other missions and by other troop contributing countries, tweaked to fit, of course, the specific context and component of each mission. More specifically, I would like to underscore the following points, if I may. Firstly, we need to strengthen the capacity in the Secretariat and in peacekeeping operations, and this is critically important so they are better placed to provide viable analyses of the socio-economic and political context of the country in question. Analyses that in turn feed into strategy setting. And to boost that capacity, we will need to do so along all resource lines, including financial ones, more financial resources for this capacity building. Capacity building is also key to ensuring the incorporation of gender issues in the design, planning, implementation, and evaluation of peacekeeping operations. Secondly, candidates for deployment to a mission, whether to a police or military component, must have proven knowledge of the rules of combat engagement to enhance the implementation of international law, including international humanitarian law. Candidates must also comply with the requisite standards so that they can better serve the peoples dwelling in their theatre of engagement, particularly in terms of human rights protection, including the rights of children, and responding to conflict-related sexual violence. Candidates for deployment should also be brought up to speed on local culture and develop the language skills necessary to be able to communicate in the language of the host country and of local communities. Thirdly, there is a need to ensure proper coordination between the military and police components, as well as with humanitarian agents and civilians on the ground, in order to ensure joined-up thinking and action in the work of the United Nations when it comes to the maintenance of peace and also of peace building. The Security Council ought to carry out visits to peacekeeping missions so as to be able to assess firsthand their performance. By the same token, we strongly recommend interaction and coordination between the Security Council and the Peacebuilding Commission, or PBC. Such interaction and coordination should take place before field visits, as well as before any mandate renewal and any decision on mission transition. President, we would like to reiterate the Dominican Republic's commitment to the full implementation of Resolution 2436, including our full commitment to supporting next steps to plug gaps in order to ensure full implementation of said resolution and full contribution to peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I now give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative of Kuwait. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. At the outset, allow me to thank all the organizers of this timely meeting. It is very timely to discuss improving peacekeeping performance more than 1 year after the adoption of Security Council Resolution 2436 and the Declaration of Shared Commitments. During this time, progress was achieved by the Secretary General and Member States. We followed the serious steps taken by the Secretary General through his assessment of peacekeeping performance and identifying special indicators to promote communication between the Secretariat and troop and police contributing countries. There were also some good financial steps that were taken. They were positive, namely the adoption by the General Assembly of resolutions that allow the Secretary General to use funds appropriately in all peacekeeping operations to address the liquidity challenges. On the future steps to address gaps in the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2436, I think we need to continue with the current path and build on it. The excellent steps taken by the Secretary General have contributed to the promotion of the capabilities and efficiencies of PKOs. The Security Council should also follow up on the progress made and should support such efforts. It must look into areas that can be included in its resolutions, especially regarding the renewal of PKO mandates. We can also establish independent mechanisms to monitor the efficiency of our troops, to assess the implementation status of the resolution and the declaration, the A4P declaration. We must also assess efforts made to protect civilians. When we talk about peacekeeping, there are three aspects that ensure the success of our operations: the role of host countries, peacekeeping operations, or peacekeeping troops, and namely TCCs and PCCs and the Secretariat, and the mandate and its resources. This is something that was addressed in question 3. To improve the performance of our operations, we must build trust among all parties. Such meetings are very positive, and this practice should be continued in the future to develop communication channels between stakeholders. We encourage TCCs and PCCs and the Secretariat to build on the current cooperation in pre-deployment training and to see how to share such information with the Security Council so that it can provide them with the necessary support. In conclusion, improving peacekeeping performance and efficiency through the promotion of partnerships with non-governmental and academia entities is positive and should be studied carefully. The study jointly conducted by 2 centers showed some positive developments in the use of renewable energy. This could contribute to reducing the budget, and it leaves a positive impact on the host country after the mission's withdrawal. Member states must support such initiatives. We renew our support and appreciation to TCCs and PCCs. They play an important role in achieving international peace and security, and we salute every step taken to ensure their safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that statement. I now give the floor to Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to thank the U.S. delegation and co-hosts for organizing this important event today. We would also like to thank USG His Excellency Jean-Pierre Lacroix for his briefing earlier today. Madam Chair, the last few years have seen an enhanced focus on peacekeeping performance, developing database systems for its evaluation and system-wide application of these evaluations for achieving better results on ground. For system-wide accountability in peacekeeping, which is critical to performance, it is important that evaluations are applied. This assumes further significance given the fact that performance cannot be evaluated solely in terms of what peacekeepers did or did not accomplish on ground. This depends on realistic mandates, adequate resources, capabilities, and many other factors that are not in control of TCCs. This fact is also recognized by UN Security Council Resolution 2436. As a leading TCC, Pakistan supports the implementation of a database system for performance evaluation. While the Secretariat's efforts towards developing such systems are appreciable, let me make 6 key points. Performance evaluations should guide decisions in case of repatriations and fresh deployment, including during mission reconfiguration, transitions, and mission drawdowns. 2, deployment should be through the PCRS. Units at RDL, which is the highest level of readiness, should be accorded priority when deployments are being considered. 3, delays in deployment result in unnecessary costs to TCCs. On the one hand, TCCs do not get reimbursements for the duration of delays, while on the other hand, these assets could not be deployed for national demand since they have been committed for peacekeeping. 4, we could have the best trained peacekeepers and most advanced critical assets on ground, but would not be able to utilize them optimally if caveats or complicated mechanisms are involved in their deployment for operations. It is therefore imperative that all required assets are made fully available for utilization by the mission as required by the ground situation. Caveats are also a hindrance to accurate evaluations of performance. 5. The Secretariat bears the responsibility of providing pragmatic and realistic analysis of the ground situation in terms of political environment, resource gaps, and possible exit strategies. This information then needs to be reflected by the Council in mandates. 6. Rather than focusing just on cost-cutting, troop numbers,